Hello and welcome to Real Chat with Kat, the podcast dedicated to igniting your entrepreneurial spirit and empowering you to conquer new horizons. In this podcast, we chat with inspiring entrepreneurs on their journey to success through some amazingly insightful and expansive conversations. These episodes thrive on thought-provoking chats where our guests fearlessly explore their path to success, sharing their experiences, failures, and triumphs. No topic is off limits as we deep dive into the talked about and not so talked about pieces it takes to build a business, overcome limiting beliefs, deal with personal struggles, and everything in between that shapes our lives and our businesses. I'm your host, Kat Polsinelli, creator and founder at The Lotus Effect, where we believe that success is not just about strategies and tactics, it's about cultivating a powerful mindset and creating customized business operations that align with you and your true purpose. Whether it's mastering time management, improving productivity, enhancing leadership skills, or simply fostering a growth-oriented mindset, we'll provide you with the tools and strategies to flourish in both your business and personal life. I'm so excited to have you join us today in this episode, so get ready to feel empowered and inspired as we learn together and from one another on how to rise above challenges, break through limitations, and unlock our full potential. Let's dive in. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining me today on this episode of Real Chat with Kat. I am so excited to have you here with me today. I have a really awesome guest that I am super excited to introduce you to. So, Brandon, thank you so much for being a part of the podcast today.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I had my conference a couple months ago and I talked about this concept. It was greatness is contagious. And as soon as the podcast started, you smiled and you brought good energy. And all of a sudden, I got 10 times more excited to do this podcast. So thanks for that incredible introduction. And I'm excited to chat with you today.
Yay! I love that. Greatness is contagious. I love that. I'm gonna have to keep that one in my back pocket. Well, thank you so much for being a part of it today. I'm super excited to have you here and be able to jump in. You have a lot of knowledge that I'm super excited to be able to share with everybody as well. So as we get started, let's go ahead and dive in. Please tell us, who you are, what it is that you do, and what kind of got you into that space.
Yeah, I took a public speaking class in college. It was my freshman year. We were required to take it, and I was getting C's and D's. I looked over at my teacher. I said, what the heck do I got to do to reverse this? Because it's not like I was a great student, but I was a and B type of student. And she said, Brandon, if I were you, I'd talk about something you're passionate about. So I'm like, what am I passionate about? And so I took a lot of time to think about that. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to talk about my childhood crush, Shania Twain. And so I did a speech on Shania Twain. And as I was preparing the speech, I felt like I was cheating. Like homework never felt that easy. And so I got up there, I started singing some of her lyrics, and I'm not a singer. So I was kind of doing it in a joking way. And I was sharing the stories about how she kind of made it later in her career. And you could feel the excitement coming out of my voice. My teacher gives me back the grade. It says A on it. I said, wow, that big of a difference. And what was cool was, to this day, over a decade later, I still have multiple people who were in that class with me that remember me doing a speech on Shania Twain. So I said, okay, well, if I just start talking about stuff I'm passionate about, maybe the kid who was monotone, maybe the kid who was shy, maybe the kid who was an introvert in high school doesn't have to be that person as he grows into an adult. And so now I've been lucky enough to be able to teach public speaking workshops all across the country. I did one in California, I did one in Toronto, I did one in Chicago, Miami, and New York City, Connecticut. So it's been exciting to be able to do that because I was not the one that you would think would be doing this. But because I started talking about something I was passionate about, I started getting passionate about this thing called public speaking. And it started after that by giving pep talks to my college buddies before we would play in golf tournaments. And I would visualize my speech before, like the night before, I'd be visualizing, okay, how can I bring value to the boys? Like, what can I say? And it's funny because I'm getting ready to release my fifth book, which is How to Become a Phenomenal Public Speaker. And in the acknowledgement section, the dedication section, I forget which one it is, I put in there, I said, you know what? I got to give a shout out to the patrons from my college who gave me an opportunity to give them pep talks before the golf tournaments, because one of my buddies recorded my speech and then we put it out there on social media, and that got a lot of positive attention. And all of a
Nice.
sudden I started looking at myself as a speaker. And so that's how things kind of took off. My former career was a golf fitness trainer, and once I started getting pretty good at that, I was like, okay, where can I go with this? So I took a public speaking course back in 2018, and then I started speaking with that. I got voted top 50 in America when I was 26 years old, and then
Wow.
yeah, and then I had my first really big speaking engagement in that field. And then shortly after that, the pandemic hit. So
Mm.
I was like, all right, well, what do I do? And I was talking to my mentor. He's like, Brandon, I can't tell you what to do. He's like, the world could end tomorrow. But he said, I could tell you one thing. It's important to be there for your people during times where you have no idea what's going to happen. So, think about a loved one when they're sick. What do? You naturally, okay, I got to be there for that person. Well,
Mm-hmm.
when the pandemic was hitting, a lot of people were mentally sick because all of a sudden, uh, jobs were getting cut. You couldn't socialize like you used to be. And quite frankly, half the people thought the world was probably going to end. So, and understandably so. So it just gets to the point. It's like, well, even if you don't know what exactly to do, the main thing you could do is just be there for your people. And so I knew a lot of kids were getting cut from internships. And that was the thing I knew the best because I did 9 internships.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to teach kids how to get their dream internship. So I posted a thing on Indeed and I said, hey, this is an internship. And all I was doing was teaching them how to get their dream internships. So I did that for about 2 years. I turned that into a book called Skip College, Read This. Got nothing against colleges. It's just that was, I saw a need for people who weren't getting what they needed out of the college education.
Mm-hmm.
And then my mentor, he goes, Brandon, I think you're onto something here, because he used to guest speak on my mentorship calls for these high school and college students. He said, I think you're ready to start teaching a speaker school. He said, you've been mentoring these high school and college students. And when I was doing that, I was speaking 2 times a week throughout whatever duration that was. And so I was getting a lot of practice doing this. And then I had my first personal development conference in 2021. It was October 2nd. And after that, he said, Brandon, I think you're ready to start teaching a speaker school. And I thought he was nuts. I said, you teach a speaker school. Why are you telling me to teach one? But, he's probably around 68, 69 at the time. And, he had done pretty much everything he wanted to do with his career. So one of the coolest things I feel like is when you do something really impactful in this world, when someone else can continue to spread a lot of that knowledge that you've accumulated. And so he didn't ask me to do anything with his business. He said, Brandon, just start teaching a speaker school. So I called the best speaker I knew in the area. His name was Carl Michelle, and he made his living speaking in the New York City school system. So I said, hey, do you want to start teaching a speaker school? He said, let's do it. And 2.5 years later, I'll be teaching my 20th speaker school next week in Laguna Beach, California. And that will be my 17th that I've taught with Carl. So
Wow. Congratulations.
yeah, appreciate it.
I love that you took a different twist too on everything that you've kind of been through and you've worked on even during the pandemic. And what I hear is you saw a need, but you also saw something that you enjoyed and that you could expand on it to help others. And then as you continue to kind of do that, it's almost like you got to kind of cherry pick some of the other things that you wanted to include in it to just be able to expand it more. And I feel like that's what a lot of people are looking for in the entrepreneurial space, right? But we kind of get lost in the mush of it and everybody's selling all of the things. And we forget that that was the whole reason that we got into it, was to create this space, because we do have this mission or this passion, like you're talking about, that we want to share with others. And I feel like those that I have spoken with that lead with that passion are the ones that are successful, and doors do open up that we're like, where did that come from? Like, it's just interesting and to think about the way that the world works when you kind of shift the focus and change your perception on what is priority or what's the most important thing to you. And I love that you talked on, the fact that kids that are introverted or, maybe scared to be on stage, whatever, can still do it in a way that is natural to them. And I know you and I had kind of talked about this before the podcast. I love the way that you teach as well, because in my opinion, there's a beautiful structure, but there's also an element of being able to be you, which I think is what more people are looking for, not only in the speaking space, but in the world, right? The pandemic, I think, really shifted people's perceptions into what really was important to them. And I think a lot of people started realizing that when they were completely confined and couldn't be around other people. So how would you say that, let's say you're speaking with someone, or I know that you've worked with someone that is kind of in that space, right? Like, kind of has this passion, enjoys like talking about it, but right, the whole fear of even standing up in front of everybody just completely chokes them down. How do you even begin to get out of that fear and that mindset to start pursuing something that ultimately you really are passionate about?
The biggest thing is just to do it. It's like when you're a little kid and you're approaching the diving board, the first time, it's pretty damn scary. Like you're looking down, you're like, oh my gosh, do I want to do it? Do I not want to do it? And then all of a sudden you do it, and then you make it to the ladder and you climb out, and what happens? It's like, oh, let me go do it again. So I think a reason that most people have fear with public speaking is because, one, they just haven't done it. And maybe a lot of people think they have done it because they had to give a presentation at work or something like that. But it's like,
Mhm.
well, when you're training to go off the diving board, think about how much practice you put into learning how to swim before you actually make it to the diving board. So it's kind of one of those things. It's like when you can have someone who is doing public speaking and they can help teach you how to do that, then they can give you immediate feedback that allows you to see the positive results much quicker, so that you can jump into that water and swim, or so that you can get onto that stage and succeed. And I think that the biggest thing, when I had success in my first career, and I got to the point where I was like, you know what, I think I'm going to pursue something else. What I realized was it took me about 9 to 12 years to get to my peak. It took me
Hmm.
about 9 to 12 years to get to my peak. Because ever since I was 17, I was I was kind of all in with figuring out how to kind of be the best at what I was learning and then ended up doing. And I was like, okay, if it's going to take me another 10 years, I want to do something that can leave a great impact on society. And there was this book called it was a book and then it turned into a movie. So most people will probably know it from the movie. There was a movie that came out in 2000 called Pay It Forward. And
Okay.
this seventh grader, Trevor McKinney, he's sitting in class. It's the first day. He's got a whole new teacher. He's got all new classmates. And on the chalkboard, the teacher puts this year-long extra credit assignment. Before he starts teaching, he said, this is the year-long extra credit assignment. He said, think of an idea that could change the world and put it into action. And I remember seeing that movie when I was a kid. They showed it in one of the classrooms. And that planted a seed, but not too much. But as I got older and I started thinking about my transition, I actually rewatched that movie. And I truly believe that movie really inspired me to start thinking about, hey, what could I do that could leave a positive impact in this world over time?
Mm-hmm.
Because the whole idea behind the pay it forward concept was, okay, if I'm one person, I can't change the world. But if I can use other people and have a positive influence on those people, and they have a positive influence on other people, and they have a positive influence on other people, then maybe this could spread. And so he said, I'm going to pay 3 people a favor and then not ask for anything in return except for them to pay it forward and pay 3 other people a favor. And so that helped me start thinking differently. My vision is a little different, but I will 100% give that movie credit for inspiring me to think the way that I think. And I said, what could change the world? If something could, what would it be? And I said, well, 1 + 1 = 2, and 1 - 1 = 0. 1 + 1 + 1 = 3. 1 - 1 - 1 = -1. So I said, if I could focus on getting around more +1s, then collectively we can help people have better health. Collectively, we can help people have better wealth. Collectively, we can help people have a better mindset. We can help people have better relationships, more fulfilling relationships. Because if you're around people who are talking about, hey, I've been struggling to get this point across to my son. And then there's a +1 who says, hey, you know what? I actually struggle with that same problem. And then I reached out to this lady, Jill, who helped me understand what to say every time my son says that. Versus the -1 who says, I've been having that same problem. What the heck? Like, why do these kids think we know the answers to this stuff? Why do they treat it? So you can see the difference between a +1 and a -1. And it's in all aspects. If you want to think about wealth, think about the vision that you have. You have a big vision and you say, hey, my goal is to have $1 billion business, and you're sitting with a friend at dinner and they say, oh, that's incredible. Can you tell me a little bit more about it? Versus the -1, you say, oh, my vision is to have $1 billion business. And the -1, they say, that's not possible. Why would you even waste your time doing that? And so you could see the clear difference. Okay, what about health? So say you're in college, you have a couple roommates, and you go out, you have fun that night. You wake up the next day, and one roommate says, hey, we had a lot of fun last night. I'm gonna go for a walk, kind of just get my thoughts back together and enjoy the day. And do you want to go? That's a +1. Then you have the other roommate, the -1, who says, oh man, last night was so much fun. I'm so hungover. I think I'm just gonna lay in bed and watch Netflix all day. And then you say, well, I'm actually gonna go for a walk. And then they say, why the heck would you do that? Come on, man, like chill out. So you could see the difference. If we could just be more of the plus ones over time, we're going to be able to attract more solutions. If we're more of a minus one, we're going to continue to contribute to a lot of the negative things that are happening in this society.
Yeah.
So that was the whole idea, because a plus one is a warm heart. A plus one is someone who cares. Not just about them, which is an important part, but about everybody else. A minus one mostly just cares about themselves. So that's the whole concept of warm heart, and it's based off core values: create opportunities for yourself and others, active lifestyle, live that through your words and action. Respect is earned, not always given. Think about if you're a very successful celebrity, you're in many Disney movies, and kids absolutely love you. A kid's walking down the street and asks for a picture, and you say, hey, can't give a picture, have a good day. How much respect is that kid going to have for you? I know that's an unfair judgment to the celebrity, but think about that.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, that kid is not going to have respect for that celebrity. And I live in a town where there's a lot of celebrity, there's a lot of public figures. And so I hear a lot of stories about this. And I know how much that devastates the kids. And then the parents start thinking of them a little differently. So it's a real thing, earning respect on a daily basis, no matter who you are. So we could have a good relationship, and then I show up to a call, I don't look interested, my eyes are closed, I'm on my phone, and then all of a sudden it's like, I don't want to talk to Brendan again. That was not a fun conversation. Respect, in my mind, if you can understand it has to be earned on a daily basis, then you're going to be able to do some incredible things. And then the last one is excel forward to get what it is that you want. So that's my conference is called A to B Con, and it's all based on that concept. It's like, okay, point A is where you are right now, health, wealth, relationships, happiness, and it could be in a good spot. And then point B is where you want to be, whether there's a long way to go to get there or whether you're just trying to get a little bit better. And so the fastest way to get there is a straight line. And everybody, the minus ones will say, oh, there is no straight line. Yeah, no kidding. Thanks for saying the obvious, but there is a straighter line. And that is to learn from the people who have what it is that you want. So that's the core values behind Warm Heart Life that were inspired by Starbucks, Amazon, Pandora Jewelers, and Walmart. So
I love that.
Yeah.
I love where the inspiration came from. But I also love the fact that this comes back to a very important concept that a lot of people talk about, and I didn't understand for a really long time, which was you are like the five closest people around you. And I was like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, I judge the people that are around me. What do you mean that I'm like them? I try not to be like them. But it is interesting how people's perceptions and people's moods, people's attitudes, when you're around them enough, start to bleed onto you, essentially, right? I mean, they say that the mind likes to fit in with where it's at. And so creating that space is extremely important. And unfortunately, this comes down to families as well, which is a really hard conversation I've had to have with a few clients. And it really does come down to, where are your values at and where do you hold those values? Because everybody can have values, right? Everybody can say that, oh, I won't put up with this, or I prefer realness. But if you're not surrounding yourself with those values, then your values really are being stepped on. So where do you hold your values, right? Are they a priority of your life? And I know that that's a really hard concept for some people. It was for me for a really long time. I grew up taking care of helping with my sisters, and then I got into an abusive relationship. I became the people pleaser. I was the one that handled everything. So that, to me, in a sense, was who I was at that point in time. And it took a really long time for me to realize that, like, oh, I can actually choose differently. That's a thing. We can do that. And I really started assessing what was important to me. What did I hold as standards, as values? And did the people around me match that. And that really, one, meant I lost a lot of people. But it ended up being a really great thing because it's a lot easier for me now to see in a very short span whether or not you are someone that I want in my circle or whether you are someone that I just need to pass on by. It's a lot like it doesn't seem as muddied. I feel like, we get around some people and we're like, oh, I kind of think, but maybe, no, maybe it was just that one time. Like we brushed it off. But when your values and your standards and your boundaries are extremely clear and you hold them to a high priority in your life, it really clears out a lot of the other things and the situations that I feel like you allow yourself to be in as well.
Oh, 100%. And just to tag on that, it's like the best part about the plus one concept is I have heard a lot of people talking about cutting people out of their life. And one thing that I have always tried to not do is cut people out of my life. What I've tried to do is be a plus one. And what happens is when you're a plus one, the minus ones, they can't take it. They can't take being around the positivity. They can't take being around the growth conversations. So what ends up happening is they just end up fading away.
Mm-hmm.
And then sometimes they'll come back in for a little bit, then they'll fade away because they can't take it. And a lot of that is because of them, like what you're saying, the environment that they're in. They're constantly going back to a negative environment, whether that's at home, whether it's the people they hang around with. And every time they get around plus ones, it rubs off on them a little bit, but then they go right back to the minus ones. And if you're around more of the minus ones than the plus ones, you're going to continue to trend back in that direction. That's why a lot of people have had success with AA in my mind, because they get there in a solution mindset. And they say, hey, we need to get better. And they have people there who can help them do that. But what happens if they go back to the negative environment? They're a lot more likely to go back to where they were. If they stay with the people who are growing, who are trying to make themselves a better person, then they're probably going to stay sober. It's a very simple concept. So my parents are incredible people, but I knew that their thinking only went so far. And if I was going to be around that, as I'm talking about as far as business growth, both of them were very successful, but their thinking it had a cap.
Yeah.
And I knew that my goal was to build something massive. And so one of the things that I did was, ever since high school, I lived away from home. And this is, it's almost a compliment to my parents too, for them letting me do this, because they helped out with so many different things. But I knew I needed to get around very big thinkers if I was going to do some very big things.
Mm-hmm.
So I would do internships every summer in different cities, and I would do them at golf courses. So I was around some of the most successful business people in the entire country. Like, I'm talking, I had long conversations with the guy who sold Joseph A. Bank. I had, I was around like the people who were high up in Coca-Cola. There was a guy who sold basically the sub shop of the Northeast at D'Angelo's. I think he sold it for 500 million. These were guys that I was around constantly. Mm-hmm. And that really helped me. I remember when I was a personal trainer, I was training this lady who graduated from Harvard, and just the way that she thought, it was just so impressive. And I trained her for years, and her thoughts definitely rubbed off on me. And so, yeah, I started to say, that I was like, who can I get around? And this is when I didn't know a lot, but I was like, who can I get around that can help start, me understanding how to make more money? And then when I was 20 years old, that's when everything really, really changed, because I was at a seminar, and it was a mandatory seminar at school. We had to be there. When you have to be at a mandatory seminar, at 6:30 p.m. at night and you're in
Ugh.
college, that's the last place you want to be.
Yeah.
And so I'm sitting there, heads down, back of the room. All of a sudden, this guy starts speaking. His name is Lou Miller, and he was probably in his late 60s at the time. I think he's in his mid 70s now. So I don't know, maybe he was in his mid 60s. And he starts talking about how he wanted to be the best in the world at what he did. And then he just told stories on how he became one of the best in the world. And he was like, listen, I wrote down the top 10 people in the entire country at what I wanted to be the best at. I wrote their names down, and then I went and learned, observed, shadowed, studied, and met. The last part was big, and met all 10 of those people.
Oh, wow.
And so I'm thinking, I'm getting this 4.5 year degree. And this guy just told me one thing in an hour that has made more sense to me than anything I had learned in school. And I'm not just talking about college. I'm
Yeah.
talking about anything that I learned from kindergarten throughout. And I have a master's degree. Anything. This guy said this one thing in this 1 hour that I was just like, this just makes too much sense. It just makes too much sense. So I wrote down my top 10 people, my top 10 list. At that time, I was interested in golf fitness training. And the number 3 guy on my list, I found out his email. We did some research. I found out his email. I sent him an email. He responded back, and then I responded back, nothing. I followed up after not hearing from him for probably a week. I followed up with him that night, or at nighttime. I get an email at, I don't know, 7 a.m. in the morning. It said, hey, I could talk in 15 minutes. Are you free?
Oh, wow.
And somehow I had looked at my email and I hopped on the call at like 7:15 in the morning. And he gave me 15 minutes of advice that helped me understand exactly what I needed to do to be one of the best. So within 3 weeks, I was talking to a guy on my top 10 list, like the top 10 people I could possibly think of. I was talking to the number 3 guy on the phone, one-to-one conversation. And he told me everything I needed to do. And so I just listened to what he's like, hey, you need to do research-based studies. Start with the kids because the parents are always willing to pay first because they're looking out for their kids. And he said they're the kids are the easiest ones to mess up on, basically. You know, if you mess up with an adult, it could lead to lawsuit, all this stuff. Yeah. And so that was really helpful because that's exactly what I did. And then I found myself, I started reaching out to the colleges. So where I was from, Binghamton University, I reached out to the strength and conditioning coach there. And she said, yeah, come on in. And so I got to spend a day with them during my winter break. And then she said, I wish you were here during the school season so you could see what this was like while things are really lively. She said, if I were you, I would reach out to the big 3 universities in Carolina where you go to school and see if you can shadow them. I said, oh, that's smart.
Wow.
So the Duke University strength and conditioning coach says, yeah, come on in. So there I am driving up to Duke University at like 5 a.m. in the morning because they had a 6 a.m. workout that he invited me to. And I get there and he says, hey, I want you to gather around. This is the whole golf team. He said, I want you to gather around. He said, this is Brandon Gaydorus. He goes to school at Methodist University about an hour from here. He came up here to shadow for the day. We should be honored that people like him believe in our program enough to come see what we have going on. And I'm just like a 20-year-old college kid. And I couldn't believe that. And I spent almost the whole day with him. And he became a mentor of mine. And then eventually he became actually a good friend of mine as I started growing up. And it was great. I mean, he sent me all of the Duke University programs for the golfers there. So at 20 years old, I'm seeing exactly how he's programming, exactly
Wow.
how he's training these kids because I saw it in person, how he's conversating with them. He introduced me to the golf coaches. And I am just like, wow, this top 10 concept is incredible. And then, and then when I got to 26 years old, I was applying to be on the Golf Digest top 50, and I realized that barely anyone had all the credibility that I had. I had a book, I had a master's, I was a PGA professional, and I had the top strength and conditioning certification for training with athletes. And then the previous list 2 years before that, I had worked for three people who were on that list. So it was just like, it was just like, okay, you may be young, but like
Yeah.
who has this, And so, when I got that recognition, I felt like I deserved to be on there. And that led to a lot of opportunities throughout the peak of my career as I started building Warm Heart Life. What a lot of people don't realize is Warm Heart Life, the concept started in 2018. I didn't do Warm Heart Life full time until May of 2023. So I was building this business for 5 years while I kept my other business going.
Yeah. I think
So
it's a beautiful concept too, that you don't know who somebody else may know, and you don't know what you could potentially learn from someone until you reach out. And that takes a very open mindset to be able to hear other people's views. Doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to take everything that they say and apply it. No, right? That's how you end up building something that's yours. But I think that the opportunity to even be able to absorb what other people have been through, have been around, that are already where you want to go, is so powerful, because to me, that's like the best schooling ever, right? I don't get just a book and take a test. I get lived experiences, and then that helps shape the direction that I want to go, the choices that I make, maybe the steps that I get to skip that they told me they wish they would have done. Like, there's so many opportunities inside of doing something like that. I love this concept of the top 10. Like, now I'm thinking, like, who would be in my top 10? Who would I want to go talk to?
I still do that to this day. That philosophy is I never plan on it leaving me. It makes too much sense. If
Yeah.
I got out of a relationship in December, I had a ton of questions going through my mind. So what did I do? I went back to the top 10 rule. I said, who is the best in this industry that can help me figure out these questions that can't stop running through my mind? And I studied a dating and relationship coach for ladies, and his name is Matthew Hussey. And then I studied a dating and relationship coach for male, and her internet name is Dating by Blaine. I don't know what her last name is. But so it was interesting. It was interesting how the male was for the females, and then the
Yeah.
female was for the guys. But either way, I wanted to study both sides, and it was almost like they were inside of my head. Like they were inside of my head, and I just had all this clarity. I was like, oh, okay, well, that makes so much sense. Oh, okay, that makes so much sense.
Yeah.
And so I'm always thinking about the top 10 rule in all aspects of life.
I think that's such a unique concept. And again, what a beautiful way to be able to skip so many steps to learn more about anything that you want to. Because again, people have that lived experience It's almost like this secret way to like bypass. It's not a secret, but I feel like, we as humans, we try to complicate it, right? Okay, well, I'd have to do this and I'd have to learn all this stuff. And it's like, there may be some aspects that that's true. And there's a lot of cases where people have already lived it. Just ask the questions, because those that lead with their passion and their mission to grow and help others grow are more than willing to give the information to help someone else, because there's a completely different mindset, which I think kind of comes back to your +1. There's that abundance mindset. There's that open mindset. It's that it doesn't matter who I am or who you are, like there's enough space for everybody at the top, versus let me hold my secrets and keep it because there's a chance you could get past me, right? And I think that people need to be aware of that concept, and how a lot of us have been raised and have been taught to have this like massive amount of competition. Whereas when you realize, when you start talking with these successful people, the competition is not there. It's not with the outside, it's within themselves and what they can do better, because they realize that it's ever expansive, it's ever open to possibilities. And I think that we are not taught that enough in our society.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And what's interesting is earlier I was talking about how I had to get out of my environment that I was growing up in to be able to think bigger business wise.
Mhm.
What I didn't share is the positive values that rubbed off on me from my parents. And I was able to say this at my conference 2 years ago when they were there. My mom is the most committed person that I have ever witnessed. I mean, she was always there picking us up every single time. And she was always there for events, sporting events, whatever it would be. And I have never seen someone so committed. And and then my dad, the work ethic that he had, like when most of my friends' parents were going out partying, my dad switched careers when we were kids, and he would be studying at night. As we got
Oh,
older,
wow.
he'd be studying at night. He'd be studying at night. And so, I think in every person we meet, there's typically good things that we can take away from them. And I walk by to the gym. I go to the gym. It's about a 10-minute walk. I live in a big city. So I walk to the gym. And every day, it seems like almost every day, there's these guys. I don't know if they're homeless or what. They just sit by the bus stop with a 24-ounce beer with a bag over it. And they just sit there and they talk. And I have learned something from them. And one of those is like, you don't have to have everything in the world to be able to laugh. And I see these guys every day. They're laughing, they're talking shop with each other, they're joking around. And I may not be want to be around them if I want to think big for my business, or
Mhm.
if I want to talk about a healthy lifestyle, but I may want to be around them if I want to enjoy being present, because those guys seem more present than 99% of the people I have conversations with. And so there's a lot that you could, I think Abraham Lincoln said you can learn from everybody, and sometimes it's what not to do. I know it's a famous quote. I don't know who actually it's by, but I think it's true. I think you can learn so many different things from so many different people.
Yeah.
And so I think that's one of the great things about this world that we live in.
Mhm. I love that. And you're so right, because every single person teaches you something, whether, like you said, whether it's something good or something you need to stay away from. We just have to be able to be present enough to be aware of those things. And I think that you're right. We do forget that in our society because we are taught to just constantly go. I love being able to slow down now and breathe. Or my husband always giggles at me because, like, if we go for a walk, I'm always looking for like the little tiny things on the ground. So I'll find like the smallest mushroom growing somewhere. And I'm like, I have to take a picture. And he's like, what? But I used to never notice that stuff before, right? I would just walk through, I'd look at the top of the trees and like go on about my way and then go back to work or whatever needed to be done. But there's so much more that I pick up. There's so much more that enhances my life. And there's so much more that I pay attention to now because I've learned to slow down and enjoy those few moments. So, as we slow down and come to a close, which I can't thank you enough, Brandon, again, for all of your information and such beautiful reminders for everybody. But one of the questions that I always ask to everyone is, do you happen to have a quote or a piece of advice that you would like to leave the listeners with?
Yeah, kind of goes with the theme of what we've been talking about today. So my favorite poem I've ever written is very short, and it's titled Becoming Great. I thought I was good until I saw great. It was then when I understood what achieving my dreams would take. And so all that means is like you could think you're really good at something, and then you get around greatness and it's like, oh my gosh, I could be doing this better. But for example, we're on a podcast right now. It's like you spend the day shadowing Joe Rogan and you see how he interacts with the guests. You meet the team members around there. You see the equipment that he's using. You see how he bounces back and forward with the questions. All of a sudden, you start to understand how you could do your podcast 10 times better. Why? Because you got around greatness. You saw it. And so I can't stress that enough. And the very first thing I said was greatness is contagious. And I believe that anytime that you're going through a dark time, a tough time, the quickest way to reverse that is to just focus on getting around greatness. And if you can do that, you're going to start to understand what you can do different, what you can do better, so that you can be looked at as one of the greats someday.
I love that. Mic drop moment. That that was the best note to leave on. So I appreciate that. Brandon, please do all of us a favor then and tell us, how can everybody find you? How can they connect with you? How can they be in your world?
Yeah. Luckily, my last name is a last name that many people don't have. So all my social medias are pretty much Brandon Gaydorus. And then Instagram, there's my personal one, but then there's also Warm Heart Life. So it's just Warm Heart Life. And that's the best way. My cell phone is 607-348-6136. Feel free to call me or text me if you have any questions. And those are the best ways.
I love that. Thank you for sharing, Brandon. And of course, everybody will have all that information in the show notes for you. So we'll make it super simple for you to be able to connect and follow Brandon. Believe me, he's got all kinds of stuff in his brain. I've had the opportunity to speak with him, have him walk through some speech for mine as well. So definitely get in his world. Brandon, again, I can't thank you enough for being a part of the podcast and sharing all of your knowledge with the guests.
Thank you.
And to everybody else out there, I hope you were taking notes. And I hope that you learned that there are easier ways to learn things and skip the line a bit versus the traditional things that we have been taught. And I feel like more of us need to realize that it doesn't have to be as difficult as we have been taught or we have believed that it is supposed to be. So that is just my tip for today. Until next time, do one thing positive for someone each and every day and see the difference that it makes in your life. So until next time, have a fantastic day. Hello again, and thank you so much for being a part of the podcast today. If you enjoyed this episode and it brought tons of value, we ask that you please share, like, and subscribe. Your support means the world to us and helps us to reach even more inspiring entrepreneurs who can benefit from these powerful conversations. If you haven't already, be sure to leave a review on your favorite podcast platform, as this feedback is an amazing gift that fuels our growth and helps us to continually improve this podcast. Looking for an extra dose of inspiration and empowerment? Then be sure to connect with me on social media. You can find me at The Lotus Effect, where I share valuable resources and tips while sharing my own journey of being an entrepreneur. And if you're interested in learning more about my coaching programs and services, be sure to check out my website at the-lotus-effect.com. Once again, thank you so much for being a part of Real Chat with Kat. Your presence and support makes all the difference. Remember, whether you find yourself in the depths of the mud or on the path of growth, we all have a unique journey. And just like the lotus, some of us start in the dirtiest of mud, yet as we rise and grow, we blossom into something beautiful, unique, and truly one of a kind. To all of my visionaries out there, keep rising and growing as you create your own Lotus Effect.